Hello, and welcome to our Ask the People Science Experts event. We are really excited to have you join us today. This series we've been hosting over the past few weeks has been so incredibly valuable to connect with and learn from each other in these turbulent times. And our hope is that these stories from HR leaders and the Ask Me Anything format provides you and other people leaders with solutions and inspiration that will help you survive or even thrive in this current environment. I will be your host for today. My name is Matt Roddan, and I'm the Head of People Science Consulting for North America at Glint, and I'm joining you today from my home in New York City. I'm really excited to be sitting down with Meredith Lubitz, who is the Senior Vice President of Talent Management at Dow Jones, to talk about how they have been listening to and supporting their people during the pandemic. So welcome, Meredith. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Matt, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Great. So Meredith, tell us a little bit more about Dow Jones, about you and your role in the organization.
Sure. So let's start with my role. I am responsible for the holistic talent strategy for the company, starting with getting people really fueled about waking up and coming to work every day at Dow Jones. So running the talent acquisition strategy, internship programs, returnship programs, and whatnot. I'm also responsible for our talent development strategy, everything from leadership development to performance, high potential development, and executive coaching. And Dow Jones is the preeminent company that really provides news and information for readers. The flagship property is the Wall Street Journal, and we also have Barron's and Market Watch and whatnot. So you can imagine we're incredibly busy right now.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of hunger for news right now.
Yeah.
So let's jump straight into the topic at hand. And as a reminder for the audience, we will have plenty of time to answer your questions at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions into the comments section at any point throughout today's broadcast. So Meredith, as a leader on the talent management team, tell us a bit about Dow Jones's philosophy on employee feedback prior to the pandemic.
Sure. Feedback is incredibly important. We've always had an appetite for feedback. We started running engagement surveys to elicit what employees felt and their sentiment around the organization in 2015, and then we pivoted over to you guys in 2018. That said, garnering feedback more than a once-a-year episodic exercise has been always challenging. We've always tried to kind of push the dial to more frequent feedback conversations. Then the crisis hit. And then we had a transition in CEO, which leads us to today.
Right. A lot of change going on in your organization. I mean, I can't imagine moving the entire workforce to remote working and all of this other stuff going on, not least the change in your CEO and this hunger for more news, huge amount going on. So once the crisis hit, what was the decision process like at Dow Jones that you and the team took to send out a crisis pulse to employees?
So we've never been here before. There's no blueprint. And we really wanted a good sense of how people were feeling. What barriers they were finding, what obstacles they were finding in the transition to work from home. And I should say about 95% of our workforce is working from home. And so my immediate response was, call Matt. So I called you and I said, Matt, here's where we are. We really want a good sensibility around how people are feeling globally. And obviously our journalists working on the news, internationally and locally, we wanted to have a really good sentiment, given that obviously their jobs and their remit has essentially gone up probably by 50%. So to address the barriers, the policies, the programs, the experiences of all employees, you had shared that you guys thought that a pulse survey would be a really great vehicle to do that. And it has been.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the survey itself. I love that you called it the How Are You survey and that you kept it really short. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to do those things.
So do you help us come up with a name? I don't know. But we thought that our engagement survey is called Our Voice. We wanted to keep it kind of similar with a similar tone and tenor. Um, Essentially, that's really what we're trying to drive towards. We really want to understand how people were doing, their well being, um, how they're feeling during this time, how we can best support them. And we decided to launch in March. We've launched 3 surveys thus far. We've kept them really short, open-ended questions. What was important for us was to get feedback around a variety of different questions, well-being being one, communication being another, feeling supported, anxiety, recommendations for us, how often we're communicating, the mechanisms by which we're communicating. And one of the things that we did differently than our engagement survey is that we extended the reach. Um, in the previous engagement survey last year, we basically looked at managers who had a span of control of 15 people. And what we did was we brought down those numbers to 8, which was incredibly helpful. We left it open for a week, and we actually proactively responded to some of the concerns and feedback when the actual surveys were opened.
Great. And as I love that as the time has gone on and you've sent out more pulse surveys, you've changed some of the content. So as you're starting to think about a plan for reopening offices, you're actually asking for employee feedback on what that might look like. So what have been some of your key learnings from the feedback that you've got from employees?
So number one is that they were so appreciative that we invited them into the conversation. Feedback, I never underestimate how important feedback has been. And certainly not during this time when we're going through such a pandemic in so many different ways. They really appreciated how often we were communicating. The coronavirus website that we put together that provide them with real practical tips around our decisioning process around returning to work. They're also incredibly appreciative of how senior leaders are engaging them. We've opened up Slack channels. We provided a lot of support in terms of messaging and communication. And they're really appreciative of all the policies and programs that we put in place. First and foremost was how do we equip them with the tools, resources, and technology to be productive at home? So we've granted them an allowance for technology. We've introduced a number of different policies and programs, one of which I think is incredibly important and very, very helpful, which is our work-life leave policy, which provides anybody with 10 additional hours a week to just really take care of the things that are most important, whether it be dependents or their children or appointments that they have to make, kind of granting them with permission to do just that and giving the managers the license and freedom to make good decisions around resource capacity and making sure that people aren't burnt out. So a number of other things around wellness. We've actually just purchased company-wide licenses to LinkedIn Learning. So given that we are learning and developing in a way different way than we have in the past, instructor-led is obviously not an option anymore. People are really, really excited about us creating learning journeys for them through LinkedIn Learning.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. And I love that you've used the feedback from those surveys, even while they were still live, to shape your responses in real time, which has been wonderful to see. And I'm sure your employees have really appreciated how agile you've been with your responses. Let's talk a little bit about moving to a more frequent approach. You mentioned earlier that you've been previously on a journey of annual surveys and trying to move towards a more frequent approach. In some ways, the pandemic has actually helped you accelerate that transformation. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've changed in your approach and how the business has reacted?
It's actually been the catalyst. It's really been the catalyst. People, there is an implicit trust in psychological safety that's created when people are providing feedback and they feel heard. So what this actual pandemic has done is it's really opened the conversation around how we can potentially have more conversations about really crafting and creating a better culture at Dow Jones. That being said, the idea of us providing a platform for more frequent conversations has been incredibly powerful. The tool itself is incredibly powerful. It's so light, it's so agile. The data provides incredible information for us. We're able to slice and dice the information and provide it directly back to our return to work committee and crisis management committee to make more informed decisions about how reopening of offices will look and shape in the future. So, that being said, we are going to be introducing and reimagining the way that we're looking at performance. Um, Starting in the next year, we're going to be offering Perform, and we've migrated over to you guys to the Perform platform, and literally going to be introducing these kind of conversation focused ways in which we should be conducting performance and really, really making it more specific to growth, conversation, rich conversations, performance, and development, and shaping what the future looks like, not only in a personal level, but a professional level. So we're incredibly excited about that, marrying it with more frequent pulse surveys around our engagement. They go hand in hand. So really looking at the linkages and the data to drive better performance and growth across the organization by leveraging Glint as kind of the holistic platform for everything.
Wonderful. It's quite a bold move. In the middle of all of this change, you've decided to shake up the performance management approach as well. Why did you decide to do that? Was the original approach not working? What are you hoping to achieve with this more agile approach to conversations?
So with most of us, who start out the journey of performance management, it's typically you know, and probably one of the most least preferred uh, exercises and processes that is done across the HR function and people function. Traditional performance reviews are really episodic. Typically, you're crafting goals at the beginning of the year that look foreign to you by the end of the year, and a two-way dialogue at the end of the year talking about how you've achieved those goals seems pretty arbitrary and more of a compliance mechanism as opposed to kind of a rich performance development, future focused discussion. So it is the future of performance reviews and arming them with your ACT model, those conversation cues around acknowledging where you are, collaborating on where we want to go, and taking one step forward is incredibly helpful for folks in terms of providing them with a really, really easy, lightweight, accessible framework for people to converse around.
That's wonderful to hear. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So I loved when we started talking about the pulse survey. You were really focused that we should not use the traditional approach to action planning that you've had with your engagement survey. You didn't want it to feel heavy for managers. You didn't want to feel to them that it was a checkbox exercise that they had to fill out actions. How did you change that approach when you were giving more managers access to survey data?
So, really interesting question. And I think there is a layering kind of response to that. Number one, a lot of the actions really rested with our management team around the COVID crisis and really rest with the people team, or also synonymous for an HR team. So a lot of the policies and programs, quite frankly, managers didn't really have control over other than influence. So I think the burden has really rested across the HR function. And for those of you HR practitioners out there, I'm sure that you share many of those sentiments. The other piece around action planning was we found that it was a once a year episodic exercise. Yet by the time most managers across the organization got to the actions, the priorities would change and shift. So they didn't align. What this provides you with when you're actually providing employees with the opportunity to pulse more often, you can action in real time. You can have those conversations around what's working and what's not. And you can be proactive as opposed to reactive in terms of directionally where you want to take the organization and how you want to respond to kind of crafting a new culture around engagement.
Wonderful. And tell us a bit about how managers and leaders have reacted. This is a big change. You've gone from once a year data to now your managers and leaders have had real survey data 3 times in the last few months. How have they reacted to this increasing information?
We're busy. They keep, we're really, really busy. One of the things that I think has kept me here, and I didn't share this before, for 12 years at this organization, is there's a kindness. There is a genuine level of humanity, human first. And everybody wants to do right by the organization. And so we are serving as strategic consultants for them in helping them not only interpret the data, but also act on the data should they need some help. They also, on the contrary, feel very empowered and autonomous to kind of take action themselves. I can't tell you how much I hear back from our managers and leaders that they've sat down with their teams, or they've had town halls, or they've had stand-ups, and they've addressed some of the major themes um, across across the organization, across their specific teams, around wanting to do it better and wanting recommendations on how we as a team grow and actually manage through the best that we can through this new normal and this crisis. So there are different rituals and customs that I'm hearing about and learning about and sharing with others to make for a really, really um, safe kind of place for people to actually embrace kind of the current state. And, you know, it is not uncommon for all of us to be scratching our head and going through this polarity of emotions through this. This is very personal, very emotional. It is something that many have not gone through since their tenure at Dow Jones. And it is creating that space, that psychological safety, and empowering managers to basically have the resources, the training, the workshops, the coaching, the guidance, if they need it, to actually make their way through this.
That's great. I have to say, it's been really inspiring to watch you on this journey, the organization on this journey of creating new habits within the organization, creating those people success behaviors that I know when we do return to whatever our new normal is, those are going to set you up for success, and using employee feedback on a more regular basis. So it's been really wonderful to see. Meredith, before we move to audience questions, one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key lessons that you have learned during these crisis pulses?
Don't underestimate feedback. Don't underestimate conversations. I do want to mention that, the Pulse survey is entitled "How Are You?" And given just current state of affairs and what's happening in the world today, with the racial tensions that are happening, we've actually broadened our recent survey to ask questions around belonging, around diversity, around equality. And it's actually extended beyond just the response to the crisis. These insights are incredibly important. We actually closed today, but I've been sifting through a lot of the comments and the things that we could be doing better and differently, or continuing to do to support our employees' success and the level of engagement with the organization and with one another. Um, I think that people love the vehicle. They love the vehicle to be able to kind of express how they're doing. And there's kind of an equality that's inherently captured when you do that, where people feel as though they have a voice. So feedback, certainly don't take it for granted. Number two is conversations do make a difference, really make a difference. Even if you don't know what to say and the right thing to say, opening the space to be a little bit uncomfortable, opening the space to let voices be heard are incredibly important.
Absolutely. Fully agree. Thank you. These are amazing insights, Meredith. Let's get to some audience questions. So as a reminder to audience, you can drop your questions into the comment section at any time. And while we wait for a few questions to roll in, let's answer some of the questions that we've been sourcing from our People Success Forum group on LinkedIn. Okay, so we've got some great questions here. From Gogi. Thank you, Gogi, for your question. Meredith, are there any frameworks or questions you would recommend for CEOs or leaders to think through when deciding whether to go fully remote, fully in office, or a hybrid model post-COVID-19? This decision seems to be top of mind for many leaders, and I've seen several organizations announce their stance over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. Again, there's no blueprint, and I'm just going to share what we have done, and we'll let you know how successful it is as we begin reopening offices, and we're starting in Hong Kong this week. I actually work with the Back to Work Committee, or I should say Return to Work and Crisis Management Committee, and I was actually just on a call with them in terms of outlining what are the parameters and criteria that we need before we decide to open up different offices. And it all starts with the health, well-being, and the safety of our employees. That is first and foremost the most important thing to consider. The second is guidance from your government and public health authorities among a number of different factors. And so what we have is this kind of checklist, so to speak, and we are going through all the different parameters before we decide whether or not we feel as though it is critical to have people back at work. We've decided as a company not to mandate employees being back at work, because what we found is that 95% of us are currently working remotely. Most of us are finding that we are just as productive, if not more productive, doing it. And obviously that changes based upon the business unit and geography across the company. We look at a number of other factors before deciding how we're going to approach this. One is case numbers. Are they going up? Are they low enough? Can the office accommodate the changes needed for health and safety protocols that we're putting in place? Do we share our offices with other businesses that we need to be cognizant of? Stay-at-home orders and local quarantines are lifted, and what that implies to local and geographic regions, the public health requirements. Public transport is huge. The majority of our employees in the US work in New York City. What does that mean in terms of public transportation? How does that impact the decision-making factors? Schools opening, camps opening, is testing available? Travel quarantines, are they reduced? And what is the PPE, the equipment that we have that's going to safeguard our employees when we're back at work? So hopefully that's helpful.
Really helpful. And it's such a complex matter for you. You're a global organization in many countries around the world, and obviously everybody's going to be on their own time frame. This is a question I've been hearing a lot from customers in different organizations recently, and it's obviously going to vary by organization. Some of the conversations I've been having are, think about the needs of your business. For some organizations, LinkedIn and Dow Jones, we're fortunate that a lot of our employees can do their jobs from home. But for other organizations that do really need their employees on site, whether a retailer or a restaurant business or manufacturing, their approach is going to be different. So that the needs of the business are, of course, going to be really important. The local laws, as you said. I also think it's really important to make sure that we are involving our employees in the conversation, that they feel like they have some control here. If employees feel like they are being forced back to work, back to the work environment before they feel comfortable, that's not setting them up for success. It's not setting them up to be engaged and productive in the environment. So actually asking employees, how do you feel about returning to the workplace? Are you ready? And what would that look like is really important. And I know that's something, Meredith, that you've been doing in your recent pulses.
So yes, that's a great point. We have people that don't even have an option. We have a subset of our population that work the printing plants. So we have to get the newspaper out, Barron's out, right? So it's obviously a discretionary decision, but obviously their job kind of relies on them being at the printing plants. For the rest of the organization, we actually have asked, what are the parameters needed for you to feel safe and comfortable coming back to work? And we've asked multiple choice questions ranging from the right health protocols are in place back at work at the workplace to a vaccine to I want to continue the flexible work arrangements that I'm accustomed to today. And then we've actually gone a step further. We have actually a return to work committee and a future work committee that's working on if we're reimagining the workplace, because I would imagine it's going to look and feel very differently. It's important for employees to provide their insights and feedback around the way in which they want to work, and we've asked an explicit question around when we are at a place where we're ready to be back at the workplace, how often do you see yourself at work? 1 day through 5 days. It's been really, really interesting to look at the responses by office, by region, by location, by demographic. Really, really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just seeing the difference of opinions. Like, obviously, some people are really frustrated being at home and they're just itching to get back into the office. And then there are many who are finding themselves to be really productive in this environment and actually want the flexibility to continue working from home. So glad you're collecting those insights. Let's move on to the next question. We have a question here from Kerry. I would love advice on how Dow Jones has helped those more used to an office setting and face-to-face socializing transition to acceptance and adoption of virtual socializing activities. Are there any specific activities these teams have really rallied around? And similarly, how have managers pivoted to remote team building when in-person seems to be the initial preference?
Great question. I think it depends on the lens of the manager. And I'm sure that many of you are accustomed to new rituals that are happening across your organization. What we're finding is there are more frequent team meetings. I can speak for myself and just our team, and just given that, the days tend to blur into each other working in an HR capacity because so much is happening at once, that it's really important to ground yourself and just meet frequently to obviously share updates and just garner feedback from your own team in terms of priorities and reprioritization. So the cadence in terms of which people are meeting, I'm finding is happening more often. I'm also finding that our leaders, and what we've done is we've guided our leaders on a set of different things that you could be doing with your team. Well-being and burnout and job security is just obviously top of mind for so many organizations, that infusing fun and team building is incredibly important. From bingo to workouts to, family lunches and dinners to happy hours to bring a pet, introduce us to your pet, which is obviously all these things are just creating a different rhythm in the way in which we are integrating personal and professional lives. There are a host of other things, and I'm certainly happy to share some ideas with folks, the best of when we're listing different TV shows, movies, what's on Netflix, things of that nature. Our team across the organization had something around, given that we're all looking at each other from the waist up, had kind of a full lens celebration where we got back to kind of understanding what the kind of human form looks like, and we all celebrated with one another. We're memorializing and celebrating different holidays together. So there are multiple ways that you can be leveraging team building and building that esprit de corps. And I can't overemphasize enough in terms of how important that is right now.
Agreed. Yeah, many people are feeling very disconnected right now, and it's important to find ways to create that connection. We've been very lucky in our team at Glint. We already had a habit of what we call question of the day. So when we start off our team meetings, we always start off with a question of the day. It could be, what's your favorite smell? What was your favorite TV program as a teenager? And we've, since the pandemic, started to create more of a regular habit around that in Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever you use, where we have a daily question. And it's been an amazing opportunity for us to connect in new ways and be more vulnerable than we have been in the past. really special connections that we have created. So I agree, any of those kind of activities are really valuable right now. From a manager perspective, with managers managing remote teams in new ways, I think it's really important to encourage those regular conversations, as you mentioned, and also give managers the tools to have those conversations, because it's different. I love that you start off your survey and your conversations with "How are you doing?" We really need to make sure that we are connecting on a human level right now, and not just moving into immediately what's on your to-do list and let's work through your week. We have to connect with employees and see how they're doing, and then move through questions like, well, what are you prioritizing, and how can I help take things off your list? I think a lot of people feel very overwhelmed right now. What do you need? What support can I provide? And just providing simple conversation guidelines like you have at Dow Jones to managers can be really beneficial. Okay, we've got some more great questions coming in. Please do keep them coming in the comments. We have a question from Kenji. Meredith, if you were to do the survey on COVID once again, so if you were to start from the beginning, is there anything that you would want to do differently?
Maybe make it available to more. Maybe that's what we would do differently. So right now we make it available to managers that have a span of control of 8 people. I think if I were to do it differently, we were a little apprehensive. Initially, we were thinking 15 because it was consistent with our engagement surveys. I am just totally impressed by how managers are not only accessing it, but what they're doing with the information. I probably would bring it down to maybe a 5-person span of control.
That's great, and that's certainly aligned with our best practice. We really do recommend that we try and go down to 5, so we're still protecting confidentiality, but we're enabling managers. It's interesting, seeing organizations come from this environment of, well, let's keep the threshold higher and let's cascade the results. We want our executives and our HR team to see it before it goes down to managers. We sometimes protect managers too much, and managers actually want to do the right thing. They want to be good managers, and they want to hear from their employees. And I think giving them access to how they're feeling is a really great thing to be doing. So I love that you've changed that habit at Dow Jones. Okay, we have another question here from Amanda, and this is about performance, so very relevant given that you're changing your approach to performance right now. Amanda says, our annual review cycle would normally begin soon. What are your thoughts on performance reviews during this time? Should they be conducted? And if so, what is the best way to go about them?
That's a great question, very timely. I just had a discussion with our executive team this morning about this very topic. Like you, our fiscal runs from July to June. So we are in the midst of year-end cycle. We have decided as an organization, given the environment, the pandemic, everything that's happening, it's really not fair to provide ratings. And we have a 1 through 5 rating scale. So we're actually going to forgo ratings this year. That's not to say that we don't encourage performance conversations. What we're going to do is encourage performance conversations. We're using the ACT model that Glint has provided us to kind of provide coaching cues to kind of frame the conversation. And the conversation should be much more around well-being, a holistic view of performance over the course of the year, what support they need, how they want to grow their career, what they look forward to, what they're most proud of, and development, very targeted development for the year to come. It'll also be introducing the Glint kind of perform change management process during this time. So, our company really feels that it's a fair and equitable way to be able to look at performance, and it doesn't obviously take the place of having really rich conversations around it.
Great. I love that you've made it lighter. I think the worst thing that we could be doing right now is burdening our employees with heavy performance processes.
Yeah.
We all know everybody dreads the annual performance review and the hours that you have to fill in different forms. And so keeping it light, whether that meaning simplifying or removing your ratings altogether, and keeping it really light in terms of the conversation prompts that you want for your employees and your managers, is a great thing to be doing, creating some of those new habits. But I agree with you, Meredith. It's so important. People still are focused on their development and their growth. And so we shouldn't ignore that. We shouldn't take that out of the picture altogether, but let's just make it lighter and easier for our managers and our people. Okay, next question. We have a question here from Jim. Are there any programs you implemented in the last few months that didn't work? And what did you change to ensure that it did work out?
That's a great question. The answer to that is absolutely. But I should say, we began to introduce it across the organization. So, what you find in a pandemic like this, kind of it changes the rhythm of the organization. It changes priorities. For example, we have a huge Wall Street Journal events team. Just for example, CEO Council is a huge experience that people participate in, and it's very high profile. Other experiences are like the future of work and things of that nature. Clearly, people aren't coming together for these events right now. So what we have decided to do and what we thought might be helpful was take a look at capacity and resources. And given that people are reprioritizing their work, they're also reprioritizing certain aspects of the business. Our customer service business is insanely busy. Our newsroom is incredibly busy. And we thought it might be a good idea to take a look at our resources and talent from parts of the organization and have them actually help support other parts of the organization. And so what we introduced were a couple of different experiences that broadly the organization is not very familiar with, but it is happening in pockets. Things like secondments. Secondment is what we deem as kind of a short-term stint, maybe 3 to 6 months, working in another part of the organization to kind of have better development opportunities, bring back your learnings, and potentially be a future career path for you. We introduced it to parts of the organization, and the immediate response to some was, what does this mean? And given that we're faced with a time of job security being kind of at the forefront, I think what it did was it unhinged parts of the organization. There was a little bit of apprehension about even raising their hand to be part of the experience. And so we treaded back very quickly, and we decided to put a pause on those types of experiences until we're more in a stable state and not introduce something like this broadly.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Meredith.
Mhm.
Okay, another question in from Katie here. Many of our office-based employees are now working remotely. What are you doing to ensure your now remote workforce is best supported and motivated from home? Are you providing them with work from home based learning modules, stipends for office furniture, anything like that? And also, how are you supporting your essential workers?
Yes, all the above. So we provided a stipend for at-home technology, support, resources, equipment, monitors, things of that nature. We're supporting them with programs. The work-life leave program that I had mentioned that grants people 10 additional hours to tend to what they need to is something that we are really encouraged by, and people are responding very well to it. I think the challenge with that is people saying that they don't have the luxury of being able to take 10 hours a week off their day to day to really commit to managing life and work together, which I know many of us are feeling, particularly those with dependents and small children. We're also offering LinkedIn Learning, and we're actually providing guiding learning paths for individuals related to some of the themes that are top of mind. Mental health, resilience, empathy, things of that nature. We're providing them also with learning paths around upskilling. It's a great opportunity to think about, given that we're in this virtual environment, what is their digital acumen and literacy? And is there an opportunity for us to point them in the direction of being much more adept at understanding some of the tools for the future and skills and capabilities that we'll need to thrive. We're offering other things like wellness. We have an organization or a group called Wellness 360. I think there are 400 different programs that have been offered over the last 2 months. What's lovely about this is it's organically driven. So a lot of our employees are raising their hand to lead classes, whether it be yoga or meditation or Pilates or laugh-a-thons or things of that nature. So it's actually creating a lot of community across the organization. And there are a number of different policies that we're also offering as well around benefits, compassionate care leave, and things of that nature that we're also mindful of that are important during this period of time.
Wonderful. Great. Well, these were fantastic questions today. Thank you all. Unfortunately, it is time for us to wrap up. So Meredith, a huge thank you for being here with us today. We really do appreciate you being part of this Ask the People Science Expert fireside chat.
It was lovely being here. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. If we did not get to your question today, please do head over to the People Success Forum on LinkedIn and ask it there. We'll have some great feedback and support from HR leaders, including the Glint People Science team. Okay, for our next event, we have a great fireside chat coming up in just 2 days. So Justin Black, our global head of people science at Glint, will be sitting down with industry expert Josh Burson to discuss HR's role in reimagining how we will work in the future. It's sure to be a great conversation, so you won't want to miss this one. You can visit the upcoming event section on the Glint company page on LinkedIn to register directly for that event and see what topics we're covering in the coming weeks. Lastly, I want to thank you, the audience, for listening and participating in today's session, and we really hope to see you at the next Ask the People Science Experts. Have a great day.